Hi guys, this is Mr. Ivan. Okay, before you start this revision 13, make sure you know all these graphs. All these graphs are called mother curves. Okay, what do I mean by mother curves? That means you need to know that for whichever the power n is, okay, for whatever the power n is, how is the graph? How does the graph look like? Okay, so these are all the 6 scenario and then 8 scenario. Make sure you know that, make sure you have them handy in your phone or something, okay, and then whenever you need it, you will have it, and by the time you have O level come or N level comes, you are very familiar with it. Okay, so the first one, when we have N is equal to -2. Now why is this like that? It's because this is AX. I put -2 into your N here, so it's power -2 here. Okay, so in indices, remember a negative power means he goes from the numerator to the denominator. So this will be A over x squared. It's not A over 2x, it's not A over square root. Negative power just means that algebra goes from numerator to become denominator. So for A over x squared, you need to know that it is a reciprocal. This is called a reciprocal graph. That means when x increase, y decrease. Okay? And then on both the first, this is called the first quadrant, and then the second quadrant. So if A is negative, or rather if you have a negative one, if you put a negative sign in front, then you will flip it to the negative y-axis. So always remember the difference between the first, this diagram number 1 and this diagram number 2 is when you put a negative sign in front, negative sign versus this sign. Okay, flip it from the positive, this is the positive y-axis, to the negative y-axis. Then you don't need to remember so many, you only need to remember a few. Okay, so this is for y equals to A over x squared, or when n is the power is equals to -2. Next, if the power is equals to -1, this would mean that this is equals to y equals to ax to the power -1. Again, negative power means he will become A over x. Okay, and in this case, the difference between him and him is because when you square the x, or when you do an x square, all the negative x value will become positive. That's why both are in this and here. Whereas for 1 over x or A over x, it is from in here and here. Okay, and when you have a negative in front, anything from the top go to the bottom. Anything from the bottom goes to the top, and that's why it will become like this. Okay, next is when you have y equals to ax to the power of 0. X to the power of 0 is 1, so you are left with y equals to a. Y equals to a is a horizontal line that cuts the y-axis at a. So if you have, let's say, y equals to 5, then what are we drawing? We are drawing this line that cuts the y-axis at 5. So this is y equals to 5. Y-axis, x-axis. Okay? And then if it's a -5, then it's at the negative y region. Okay, so now take a screenshot of this so that it's easy for you to refer when you need it. Maybe I will also box this up, box this up, box this up, box this up. Okay, next, so when the power is equals to 1, I will have y equals to ax. Anything power to 1 is a linear line. This is called a linear line. Okay, and the gradient is equals to a because the number that accompany the x is the gradient. Okay, so whenever you see ax only, it means it's a linear line. If the gradient is positive, it's going up. If the gradient is negative, it is going down. Okay, now if I have y equals to x plus 5, this means the y-intercept is at 5. The graph would look like this. Make sure you label that this is 5. So y equals to x plus 5. Okay, if you have equals to negative x minus 2. This means that the graph is going downwards and cut the y-axis at negative 2. So this is negative 2. Y equals to minus x minus 2. Okay? Positive gradient, the linear line that is going up. Negative gradient, the linear line is going down. Okay? And then the constant is the y-intercept. Okay? Next one. When you have y equals to ax squared, anything is with x squared is either U shape or N shape. U shape if the a is greater than 0, so in this case, yeah, this will be a U shape, and then if the a is smaller than 0, then it is N shape, or in this case, you put a negative in front. It is N shape, okay? Negative, N shape. Positive, you smile, U shape. So anything with x squared is a U-shaped graph. Any quadratic equation you can factorize, it will become a U-shaped graph. Okay, that we will discuss in the questions later on. So if I have this one cut at 2, this just means that this is y equals to ax squared plus 2. Plus 2 means the whole graph move up by 2 units. Okay, so if I plus 1, then the whole graph will look like this. Y equals to negative ax squared plus 1. Same thing if I put minus, means I move it up. Okay, and the next one you have is y equals to x to the power of 3. It will be an S curve that cuts at x equals to 0. Okay, it will be an S curve that cuts at x equals to 0. Okay, so it's important that you know the shape of all these 6 graphs. Why do I say 6? Because the negative side is just you reflect from the positive y-axis to the negative y-axis. Okay, so take a screenshot of this now. Okay, and once you're done, these last two is a common mistake that students like to make. That if you have x as a power, this will be called an aeroplane taking off. So for example, this is like y equals to 2 bracket 3 to the power of x, like that. Please remember, you cannot ever say this is equal to 6. You cannot multiply the 2 into the 3 when the power are not the same. You cannot. Okay, and if you have to draw it like this, okay, and if you, or rather if you have a graph like this, it is always an aeroplane taking off, and then this number here would be 2. The 2 comes from here. Okay, why? Because when you're on the y-axis, means in your coordinate geometry, x equals to 0, so y equals to 2 bracket 3 to the power of 0. 3 to the power of 0 is 1, so that's why y equals to 2, and that's the y-intercept. Okay, so be careful. Do not multiply any constant outside into the power. Okay, and this is the only graph that we actually have, because now if let's say you are given y equals to half x, half is 2 to the power of negative 1. Okay, half is 2 to the power of negative 1, and this is equals to 2 to the power of negative x. So when you have 2 to the power of negative x, it will be a aeroplane landing. Okay, or if you just want to memorize, okay, if my number inside is smaller than 1 and is a power to power x, it is also aeroplane landing. Okay, if not, how do we get y? Okay, so if I have y equals, this is y equals to 2 to the power of x. The blue one is y equals to 2 to the power of negative x. When the negative goes to the x only, you are reflecting the positive x to the negative x. It's a different from what we did just now. What we did just now is when we put a negative, for example, this y squared, when we put a negative in front of the whole equation, the whole graph will flip from the top to the bottom. Okay, but in this case, when we put the, see, the original graph was, this was y equals to 2 to the power x. To change it to y equals to 2 to the power negative, we put the negative sign at the x. When we put the negative sign at the x, we flip from left to right. So it's different. Okay? So important is, if the negative is in front of graph, what we do, we flip it from up to down, and vice versa. Okay? But if the negative is in front of the x, and usually only it comes in this case lah. Okay, usually only. Okay, we flip from left to right, and vice versa as well. But in the case of O level and N level, the only time you need to flip the negative sign is only in this case, where you have 2 to the power of a to the power of something. Okay, so if you're still confused about when to use the aeroplane going upwards or aeroplane coming downwards, okay, number one, a normal graph that has a to the power x, where a is greater than 1, anything that is in your inside is greater than 1, is aeroplane taking off upwards. If it's smaller than 1 and the fractions, okay, between 0 and 1, then the aeroplane is landing. Okay, and how to find the y-intercept? Always just sub in x equals to 0, and that would be